a stranger with a gun came upon two teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery. I'm Casey Scott, and my road to recovery began with Pinnacle Recovery Center. If you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Dr. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing really well.
All right, so I just celebrated my 1-year birthday.
I know.
Of sobriety.
Of sobriety, yes.
Yeah, I never thought I'd celebrate a birthday without a beer.
Yeah?
Yeah, and that would have really ruined this birthday.
It would have been problematic.
Yeah, very problematic. So
well, I'm proud of you, man. I wanted to tell you that, and I'm really pleased with everybody's response on Facebook, wishing you well. And
I was overwhelmed
yeah.
by the support and the gratitude that I mean, it was just amazing to be able to sit back, and I tried to respond to as many people as I could.
Yeah.
But it was just so many people, and it's such a good problem to have because I definitely felt loved, and I feel like I'm on the right path, and we're making a difference. But I'm in awe of just how kind people are.
Well, I think people. I mean, I know people like you and follow you and feel you're a very genuine person, and people connect with that. But I also think people out there, everybody's excited to celebrate something like that. We're excited to give each other props for that sort of an accomplishment. You've worked really hard this year, and I think other people, that's inspiring to other people who are also working on the same, on their road to recovery. So that's impressive. People love to be part of that.
I'm kind of trying to figure out what my next move is because, I mean, right from when I got into the recovery center and all of that, I mean, everybody, the 1 year is a huge milestone. But don't get it twisted. 30 days is a huge milestone.
Yeah.
One day is a huge milestone for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I kind of put that, as my goal is 1 year.
Yeah.
That's what I was shooting for.
Right.
And I didn't know it was kind of like a dog chasing a tire. What do you do when you get it?
Yeah.
And so I've got that 1 year. And so now.
So what are you going to do?
Well, I'm kind of evaluating
Going to get a job?
I'm going to get a job. I mean, I've got to get a job.
I know. Dude, I don't know how. I mean, you've worked so hard, but it's been tough I don't think people really understand. I mean, it's been really hard you can't work in your profession right now like you could for 20 years. And you've had other jobs to make ends meet, but I think that's definitely the next step is to get back into your profession, right?
So yeah, that's the ultimate goal.
You should start a podcast.
Well, I'm doing that. If we could find a way to make money on a podcast, that would be even better.
Well, let's not dream,
But everybody and their dog is doing a podcast.
Yeah,
but I am
true.
so appreciative of those who download this podcast, who share this podcast, and I can tell you from the response and the emails and the direct messages I get, we are doing some good.
I had a person who was I work at the University of Utah Downtown Behavioral Health Clinic, and it's a fairly large clinic now at this point. And I had somebody come up to me just after earlier this week, just after Labor Day, and they came up to me and said, "Are you Dr. Matt Woolley?" And I said, "Yeah." And they weren't there to see me, but they were there to see a different physician, and they wanted to wish you well, and they had been listening to the podcast and kind of put two and two together that I work there, and so people are just organically sharing the podcast and listening, and they mentioned that they themselves came to listen to the podcast because of a family member who was struggling with addiction and had heard good things about some of the stories that are shared on our show.
I think when I was just right out of recovery, there were a lot of things that people that had a number of years of recovery under their belt, they would tell me that was going to happen. Uh-huh. And I didn't know if it was just them blowing smoke or whatever, or if I actually bought into it. But a lot of those things, I'm going to use a big word here, are actually coming to fruition.
Nice.
Because it really is. They go, every day gets better. Mm-hmm. And once you get your sobriety, you get these blessings that you never thought would come. I never thought, 2 years ago that I'd have a great relationship with my ex-wife. But
Yeah.
I can tell you now, it's better than it's been for a long time.
Well, that's impressive.
And the fact that, my kids and we're having genuine conversations and they're proud of me. There's so many of these little things that I just took for granted. And I just go, wow.
Life is so much better.
It is so much better. It's a little bit harder than it was, but it's so much better. And I'm getting these great opportunities, like to speak at the We Are One Recovery event coming up this Saturday.
Right.
I go talk to groups, and I was taking an Uber down here, and the guy that was giving me the ride, we talked because I can't sit in silence.
No, you can't.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him, and he tells me he's a pastor, and we start to talk, and he just goes, I really like your story. What's your podcast? I want to share it to my congregation. And I go, wow. I mean, what are the chances of things like this happening?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's pretty
the
crazy.
fact that they're going to share my story with the congregation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's just all these blessings that come around every day, and I can only imagine they're going to get better. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say that every day's sunshine and roses.
So I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you, we're celebrating your 1 year. Honestly, people like pastors and just every regular day folks are listening to the show, and I think really inspired by a lot of the guests and by your story. But, is it still hard sometimes? And if so, in what way?
It's not hard. I don't ever want for alcohol. I don't ever want for that kind of a...
You went to a family party recently.
Yeah.
Was there any drinking going on there?
Yeah.
And you never once were kind of
No.
Got that little...
No,
wish I could have a drink feeling?
No, because once again, there's nothing that's going to do to make my situation better. And I now know the situation I'm in.
How do you stay in that mindset? Because I think I'm giving you a little bit of a hard time, but I think for the benefit of the listeners, there are people who are in sobriety, have started and stopped over time. They will relate to what you're saying, better relationships, they feel healthier. But then they still go through periods of time where they get that temptation, that feeling like I just want to have a drink. And how do you stay in the mindset, stay focused on the fact that you're the things that are better? You had mentioned earlier, like your ex-wife, and I know your relationship with your kids is so important. How do you stay in that mindset?
I think a little bit it has to do with kind of all the support that I've had from the community, my family, the people at KSL that went out on a limb and gave me a second shot and kind of gave me this platform to talk. And so I know alcohol was never going to make a situation better. But the thing that keeps me completely away from it is I don't think I could look at my kid's face and the disappointment. They go, "Really, Dad?"
Yeah. Because they really are proud of you.
Yeah, it's great, and the community and my neighborhood and people have really championed me and gave me the second shot, and I don't want to let them down, and I know that's a lot of pressure, but it keeps me focused. I couldn't imagine having to sit down and have my kids go through what they just went through again.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that to them.
Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. I think staying in that mindset has to do with staying connected to the reasons that you're not drinking.
Last night I went to an opioid epidemic presentation at Kingsbury Hall. And I knew the answer before they said it, but it was for a bunch of people trying to figure out family members and what to do with this epidemic. And they said the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah.
And I really, truly believe that. And I think when I was in my addict brain and sitting on my deck, I wasn't connected. I was exactly opposite. I was isolated.
Which is really uncomfortable for you. Like you said, you don't sit in silence very often.
I'm not a big fan of it.
So you had,
I sleep with the TV on.
Yeah, I know. We've talked about how that's not a good idea.
Yeah, but I do, and I have to watch a show that I've already seen, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on something.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Big Trouble in Little China this morning at 2 a.m.
Oh, well, first of all, props. That's a great movie.
Yeah.
Second of all, you should have been asleep.
I know, but I stood up. I had a bowl of Life cereal. I went down.
Life? They still make Life cereal?
Cinnamon Life.
Cinnamon Life.
Oh, it's the best.
Oh, that takes me
That's
back.
my new addiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh man, you get that
I'm
giant.
going to score some Cinnamon Life
It's
today.
great. Don't try the vanilla.
Oh, gross.
It is absolutely horrible. But that's what I'm doing, and I'm moving forward. So right now, I
like that. The opposite of addiction is connection. That makes That makes all the sense in the world to me, and that's basically what you just said in staying connected with the reasons that you should not drink. And staying connected with the relationships in your life, including KSL. To be honest with you, when you said, because this happened when you were working for KSL a year ago, and when you got out of recovery and we spoke and you talked about maybe doing this podcast, and you said it's going to be down at KSL, I half believed that I was going to show up here and we're going to be like sitting outside by the dumpsters with microphones. I'm like, there's no way KSL is going to let him back in the building, but they've been tremendous.
They have been tremendous, and they're really on the forefront of the opioid epidemic, and that's why I went there last night.
Yeah.
And I went there, and they had a great panel. They had Mayor Jenny Wilson, District Attorney Sim Gill. They had this guy named Admiral, and I forget his last name. What was his name? Winnefeld. And he told an amazing story, and there was just so many great people. But one of the guests there is our guest today on the podcast. It's Destiny Garcia. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Was that a good event last night?
It was an amazing event.
But this has been kind of a whirlwind tour for you because they're filming a documentary about you right now. So let's just get that out of the way. What is that all about?
Well, first I want to congratulate you on your 1 year. That
Thank
is
you
amazing.
very much. It
feels
I'm
honored
great.
to be here today. Thank you. The documentary that I'm in is going to be about the opioid crisis and people overcoming it. And it kind of shines a light into how this epidemic does not discriminate. So it can hit any type of family. So Admiral Winnefeld is also in the documentary. It hit his family, and he was on the Obama administration and the Bush administration. So it can hit anyone at any time in any family. And
we hope to get him on so he can share his story, but he was just an amazing speaker. But Dr. Matt, I really want to get into Destiny's story, and so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, I was a single mom of 2. I got into a bad relationship. I was in that relationship for 7.5 years. That relationship turned to be very abusive, physically, mentally, emotionally. I would get broken eye sockets, broken noses. I still have scars on my face from it. I would go to the emergency room. I would walk away with pain pills, and then I would start to see a regular physician. The first time I went in to see a physician about I think I had a broken nose and a fractured eye socket at that point, so I looked horrible, black and blue. My face was black and blue.
And this was from the relationship you were in?
From the relationship I was in. I walked away with 190 Percocet 15s, 90 Ambiens, 90 Klonopins, and 90 Somas, muscle relaxers.
That was all from one appointment?
Visit, from my first visit.
Yeah.
Numerous visits
later. Can I ask
later.
what year approximately this would have been?
This was in 2010, 2011.
Okay. Yeah. The reason I ask is because of what happened last night, this big, wonderful event where everybody came together to talk about this epidemic wouldn't have happened back then. Yeah. This is a very recent movement for good reason.
Yeah. Back then, I knew nothing about heroin. I'd never seen heroin, knew nothing about it. Numerous trips to the ER and to the doctor's office. I became widely addicted. I was addicted on multiple levels to Ambien, to Klonopin, to pain pills. I decided to leave the relationship when it went really, really bad.
It
really
sounds
bad.
horrible from the get-go.
Yeah, it got worse.
Before we go into that, did you do any kind of partying before then?
I think in junior high school and high school, I was smoking weed and drinking and partying. I would dabble with cocaine and meth once in a while, but nothing every single day until I met opiates. That turned to an every single day addiction.
So you were a pretty casual user prior to that.
Yeah.
And that's not interesting. That's an unfortunate mix of medications that you're on.
Right.
That's you have the opiates and a variety of other things there as well, benzodiazepines, and that probably hooked you pretty quickly, I would imagine.
I remember one Christmas, my son would wave his hand in front of my face like, "Mom, are you awake?"
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that I was nodding off.
Mm-hmm. Do you think when you became addicted to the opioids, it was because of your past relationship? Was it numbing you, or was it just because you had access to them that you became addicted?
I think it was a combination of everything. I was completely broken inside because of this relationship. I was staying in the relationship. I was hopeless. I was physically dependent on these pills, and I was scared to leave. I was scared to stop the pills. I was scared to leave the relationship. I was scared of starting completely over 100%.
you may or may not necessarily remember, with all the ER visits and the doctor's visits, did they talk to you about, provide you information or support in getting some emotional, psychological help as well? Because it sounds like what you're saying is you're going in with these physical, abuse and needing help for that. But it sounds like most people who are in abusive relationships, sometimes the stuff deep down inside, the psychological and emotional trauma needs to be addressed first before we can stop that cycle.
You're listening to Project Recovery. More with Destiny in a minute.
It's the story of an American held in a dark Venezuelan prison.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
I'm Becky Bruce. I spent a year working on Hope in Darkness, which now has more than 2 million downloads. Find it on kslpodcast.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, first off, I never went in and saying I was being abused. I went in saying I was in a bar fight. I was in a car accident.
Do you think they believed that? Or
I think they would have to be, how could they believe all my stories?
Yeah.
Maybe the first one, maybe the second one. It turned into me faking knee injury and saying my knee constantly hurt. I was in there so often, they could not have believed everything that I said.
Yeah, but you didn't feel like you could be honest with them.
I wasn't honest with myself, let alone with the doctors or my family or anybody else.
Yeah.
So when you first got that prescription of 90, 90, and 90, I mean, it seems like so many that I don't know how you could be prescribed that, but you were.
Yeah.
And you kept that going for about how long?
I would say probably about a year and a half before I finally left my abusive relationship.
And you left it why? Just because it got
too bad. I mean, it was bad. I had to leave. I was going to die or I was going to leave.
Was your partner addicted to substances?
He was also addicted to opiates. He would get opiates for back injuries for work, and he had a constant prescription for him. So I would steal from him. I would steal the opiates from his bottle oftentimes in the mornings. Yeah, he was addicted to opiates as well.
So when you leave, do you pack up your 2 kids and go with you?
Funny, not funny story. Ironically, when I left, I was locked out of the house and I didn't know what to do. I picked up my kids from school. My mom took me. We went to go into the house to get my stuff and I was locked out. So my son said to me, and he was in 7th grade, he goes, "Mom, I knew this was going to happen. So my window downstairs is always unlocked. I'll go through my window. I'll open up the door and we'll get what we can." My son was in 7th grade at this point. His window downstairs was always unlocked. I didn't know that until that very moment.
And that, I mean, I can see the tears in your eyes welling up. I mean, the fact that he had the foresight to do this must have meant that he was pretty aware of everything that was going on.
They were very aware of what was going on.
And he was making an escape plan.
Yes,
and
before I even made an escape
before you
plan.
did. And that's important for people to understand that, domestic abuse and violence affects everybody in the home, whether or not they're the direct target or not.
Yep.
And so I can tell that was a real revelation to you by the way you look right now.
And we packed up my mom's car with whatever we could, and that's what I left with. I went to my mom's.
Yeah.
And you were still addicted to the opioids at this point.
Absolutely. Even more so, I think, at that point than before, because I felt like my whole entire world was crashing down even worse than being in the relationship. It's crazy how domestic violence works on your brain.
And so did your mom know about your addiction?
Everybody around me knew about my addiction, even though I would lie to their face. Yeah.
And I think that's a common story for many addicts out there. I mean, most everybody knows we're the last ones to admit it to ourselves.
Correct.
But there's no going forward unless we do that. So your mom takes you and your boys in?
My son and my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah. At that point, I was using a lot of pain pills. I left this relationship. I enrolled in school to go to college for criminal justice, youth services, and social work. I was still taking the pills, and then I started smoking meth a lot to keep me more awake at school because I was addicted to pain pills. So I was trying to counteract it. Then I started shoplifting through, it was like a 9-month program of school I was going to. It was the last class that I was in. It was a computer class. I couldn't afford the pain pills. I couldn't afford the meth. I didn't know what to do. I started shoplifting to sell merchandise. And I ended up in jail during my last class. So I never graduated that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And
I was on the dean's list every month in college. I was addicted to now multiple substances.
And so you end up in jail.
Yes.
And what happens then?
Oh, this was over Christmas time, so I had nothing for my kids. I hadn't went and shoplifted for my kids this Christmas. They didn't want to talk to me on the phone. My family's disappointed. I get out of jail, and the first thing I did was go get high. Before I went and seen my family, before I called my mom, I went and got high. It was rough.
And that just shows you how, crazy this disease is.
But I'm going to jail on traffic tickets. I'm going to jail on misdemeanor shoplifting charges. I'm going to jail, 14 traffic tickets, 13 traffic tickets I'm going to jail for. Not one time in jail was I offered treatment numerous times. Clearly, I have track marks up and down my arms, up and down my neck, all over my body. In jail, I have abscesses they're helping me take care of. But not one time am I offered treatment because my charges never warranted treatment. It wasn't a felony. It wasn't a drug charge.
And that's normally when you would be offered that kind of treatment?
Yes. Is when normally what I've found is when people are going in on felonies and drug charges, possession charges, they're offered treatment before somebody who is going in on traffic tickets that's obviously addicted.
So I wasn't aware of that. Is that just kind of an unspoken rule, or is that a policy? Do you know?
I know that, most people are like, I need to go commit a crime if I want some help.
Uh-huh. So
Instead,
it has to be
you're just
felony.
in a rebel.
And that's
or
crazy.
a drug charge. I didn't have a drug charge.
That's just crazy to say out loud. I need to commit a crime to get help.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I just go and get help? Because it's not there.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
But
That's
if
insane.
I commit a crime, then I get help.
Yeah, that's
Or
insane.
if you have a felony possession charge.
Right.
Which I never had.
Yeah, I didn't realize that they wouldn't. That wouldn't happen.
So you're in and out of jail. How many times do you think you were in and out of jail?
Oh, at least 5-6 times. Never longer than a month at a time.
But a month. That's a.
You say it like
you're,
it's
you're
nothing.
going through.
To me, that would be an eternity.
Yeah, that's.
It
that's
was
half
when
a
I
year
was
of
in
your
there.
life. But
Yeah.
that's also time for you to start having withdrawals and
Right.
and how did they deal with that in jail? You're having what were you
they give you
addicted
Gatorade.
to? Gatorade.
They give you Gatorade.
Not just for
Okay.
athletes.
No, I guess
No,
not.
I don't even know if it was really Gatorade. They give you some kind of juice mix. It was horrible.
The orange drink
It was
from McDonald's.
Tang. It was Tang.
Not that
Using
good.
up all the old Tang bottles.
They don't really do much. You sleep it off.
You sleep it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you sleep
How
it
was
off.
that? What was that like?
It was horrible. I felt completely broken and lost then as well.
Yeah.
Luckily, when I'm in jail, my family comes charging in. I had money on my books. I had phone calls. I had hygiene. I had food because my family, to them, it was relief. She's safe. She's in jail. Let's make sure she's fed while she's in there.
We've had other people on the podcast that said when they had their kids in addiction, the only time they got a full night's sleep is when they knew their kids were incarcerated.
My son, the documentary crew, was at my house this weekend, and we were talking about this. My son goes, Mom, when you went to jail, it was horrible. You were freaking out trying to get out. When you went to jail, we slept. We slept.
Wow.
We knew you were eating. That was the best time for us because we weren't worried about you. And the deeper your addiction, you don't think how your family's, what they think. You don't think that they're worrying about you. I had this thought that they didn't really care very much because here I am out on the street doing what I'm doing and none of them are doing much for me. And it's because what are they supposed to do for me? Not give me money. I'll go spend it on dope. Don't give me a phone. I'll go sell it for dope.
But if
Don't
you're
give me a ride. I'm going to pick up dope.
But if you're in jail, we're going to put some money on your books, and
Yeah.
that just means that you can go to the commissary and pick up some food and stuff.
Yeah, and hygiene and things like that. Yeah.
And so the longest you ever spent in jail was a month?
I think it was like 40 days maybe on traffic tickets because I had multiple in different counties and I had to get moved around to take care of all of them.
So this whole time that you're in and out of jail, are you still living with your mom?
Oh, no. After I went to jail from being in college and getting out, I started staying away. I thought it would be like hours at a time. I stood away and got high, and I thought in my brain, I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping the drugs away from my kids. Mm-hmm. But days turned into months, months turned into half a year, turned into my kids not wanting anything to do with me. I wasn't allowed to go back to my mom's. My mom filed custody of my son. My daughter's dad filed custody of her. They were doing what was right for my children. At that time, I seen that they were all against me, and I used the pain of that to fuel my addiction for 5 years longer.
How can you take my kids away from me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my kids. I have nothing now. So I'm going to use this as my excuse every single day, numerous times a day, to get high for years. I use that as my fuel to fuel my addiction.
Yeah, that's how the addict brain justifies, right? Were the children split up? Did one go with their dad and one
Yep,
stay
they
with
were
you?
split up. So my family did the best they can do to keep my daughter around, and her dad would bring her around up until the point of me getting sober. Like they kept in contact, maybe not as often as they could have, but they're taking my role on, so they did the best they could to try to keep them together.
Understand, yeah.
On one side, my son is around all the time. I see him all the time in the deeps of my addiction and me getting better. He's been there. But my family has been there, and he's been with my family. My daughter has been separated and secluded and hasn't been around pretty much at all. So she has a lot of hatred for me still to this day.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are your children over the age of 18 yet?
Yes, my son is 20 and my daughter 17, and then I have a 10-month-old baby.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So to get back to your story, you said days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into year?
5.
5
Turned
years.
into 5 years, yeah.
And as they say in the addiction world, you're just running and gunning.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing every day. I was waking up to figure out what I was going to go shoplift, what I was going to go steal, what I could trade to get high. Middle of the day, what I can trade to get high. At night, I need something to go to sleep. Crazy, I need something to go to sleep and something to wake up to function.
So let me ask you this. How did you go from the opioids to the heroin?
I left the relationship. Mm-hmm. I left the money. I left the house. I left the cars. And I was on my own. And I started shoplifting. I had no money. I had nothing.
And that's just easier to get?
Heroin?
Yeah.
I could take merchandise to a heroin dealer and trade it. I can trade stolen items. I can trade the shoes on my feet if I needed to, where I couldn't go to a doctor's office and say, can you take this stolen merchandise so I can see the doctor? And then can I use this stolen merchandise to fill the prescriptions for the opiates? It was way easier to get.
And I think that's...
And cheaper.
Yeah, I was going to say both access and cost. I think one of the things that I've been, I don't know why surprised, but surprised about as we've done this show this year is so many people telling a very similar story, at least the pattern of having injuries, needing medical attention, being prescribed, and I think we're realizing as a medical profession, overprescribed opiates, and then that becomes an addiction. But it eventually dries up. Access to that dries up. You don't have the insurance. The doctors stop prescribing, and getting those illegally, it's much more difficult than getting heroin. So people turn to heroin.
Yep.
Do you think you would be addicted to heroin if you weren't offered that first prescription?
No. And it wasn't the first one. It was the next one, and the next one, and the next one. No. I didn't even, like I said, I think I've already said this. At the beginning of my opiate addiction, I never even seen heroin. I didn't know anybody who used heroin. I knew nothing about heroin. I didn't even know what it looked like at the beginning of my opiate addiction.
I like to think I'm a street savvy guy, and I've got a little hood credit. You know what I mean?
South Ogden, baby.
Yeah, but I wouldn't know where to get heroin.
Yeah, I'm glad you don't. Neither. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I know where to get heroin because of people I've worked with. But like you said, most people aren't in that world.
Yeah.
Like unless an addiction drives you to that world, it's not really the party drug. People will use cocaine and people will smoke marijuana and people do other things. But heroin, it's kind of a whole nother world. And I think there are certain things like opiate addictions that kind of pull a person that way. Otherwise, most folks wouldn't know where to get it.
Because you're so open and honest, What does that world look like? I mean, for somebody, who's sitting at home and has their son or their daughter or their brother or their husband or their wife into heroin, what does that world look like?
I don't think you can pinpoint what that world looks like simply. That world to some people looks like going in their bathroom at dinner and shooting up a shot of heroin and their family not knowing. That's how it started for me. Turns into illegal drug deals you're doing to try to get heroin. Though some of those drug dealers, their families don't even know they're doing it. Down to, I ended up on the streets of North Temple homeless shooting up heroin. I think it's in a lot more families and more households than people want to talk about, that people want to recognize, and a lot of people are turning their eye to it. I think it's in a lot more communities that people don't want to talk about.